If you don't mind, let's take a moment for the sponsors so they can keep the lights running and keep West Virginia Commonplace going. 1998, Stamps.com has been an indispensable tool for nearly 1 million businesses. Stamps.com brings the service of the United States Postal Service and the UPS shipping right to your computer. Whether you're in an office sending invoices, a side hustle Etsy shop, or a full blown warehouse shipping out orders, Stamps.com will make your life easier. All you need is a computer and a standard printer, supplies or equipment. Within minutes, you're up and running, printing official postage for any letter, any package, anywhere you want to send. And you'll get exclusive discounts on postage and shipping from USPS and UPS. Once your mail is ready, just schedule a pickup or drop it off. No traffic, no lines. Cut the confusion out of shipping with Stamps.com's new rate advisory tool. You can compare shipping rates and timelines to easily find the best option. Save time and money with Stamps.com. There's no risk, and with my promo code POD, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in POD. That's Stamps.com, promo code POD, Stamps.com. Never go to the post office again.
Right. Howdy, everybody. Welcome to West Virginia Commonplace. There comes a point in your podcast where you have to start doing things a certain way. You can't just get out here and start podcasting and thinking that just because you use your voice, you ask a few questions a certain way, you dive into different genres and all this other stuff, that your podcast is going to make it and stay afloat. After you publish a podcast, there's something really serious that people do not take serious in certain forums, and those are called as show notes. Tonight, today, this morning, this afternoon, whenever you listen to this podcast, I have a very, very special guest. She is returning to the show. Her name is Lisa Sheeley.
Hello.
And Lisa has an expertise in show notes. She is the podcast virtual assistant, and that's her title, the podcast virtual assistant. There's no one that comes between her and that title because she is the truth. Many podcasts will attest to that, and I'll attest to that too, that when you need the inside information or you want to polish your podcast, you go to Lisa. So Lisa, how have you been doing lately?
I've been good. Thank you for having me back on the show. Really happy to be here.
Glad to have you back on. Now, after COVID has happened, has life changed a little bit for you?
I mean, when it comes to my VA work, not really, because it's always been virtual and it still is. Like when it comes to my day job, like you can relate to this. The day job has changed. I'm back in the office, which I love. I'm not a fan of working from home. But I was very grateful that I could do my job from home. But yeah, in the day job, I'm back in the office, but the virtual assistant piece has not changed at all.
Okay. And I started doing this different series because I have like 17 different series, all available on different platforms. It's called a behind the scenes for podcasts. The very first episode I did was with an audio guy, and his name is Sean Chapman. Very good guy out of Colorado. And I did that episode because I was one of those people that was cheap. I still don't have an XLR microphone, but I went ahead and I found the Yeti Blackout or whatever it's called. I found it on sale for like $49.99. I wasn't going to pay $130 for it, but I bought it and I started getting better quality in my episodes. I can actually hear myself now, and
Nice.
It sounds professional. It's more polished.
Yeah.
It's not that crazy. It used to sound like I was just inside of a box and had people on my podcast or whatever. So I started refining that. And the problem with me inside podcasting has always been this: some way, somehow, the people around me give me an edge on things. So sometimes you can look past it for a little bit, but then there comes a time that someone's like, "Hey, JR, come to the side of here, buddy. You got to buy a microphone." Well, I bought the microphone. The episodes were doing well, and then this question has come up way too many times in meetings and all these different calls. Why are your show notes so crappy? You have a decent show, but your show notes are crappy. You just point to one thing You put a link in there, and you keep going. One time, I had a show note that was only 14 words.
Mm.
So you are here today to explain to us the importance of show notes.
Mhm.
So would you please
Yes.
tell us about them? First, tell us what a show note is, and then and the forms of it and all that. Educate us, please.
Okay. So a show note is just a written version of your podcast episode. And there are different kinds of show notes. You can have a short form show note, which is a summary of the episode, or you can have a long form show note, which very closely follows the conversation. So you almost, it's not a transcript necessarily, although you can do that as well, but it very closely follows the conversation. And I don't use like Descript or other transcript services. I listen to the episode and write as I go. It takes me longer, but I feel like it produces a better quality show note that you can read it and not ever listen to the podcast and still know what it's about and still, get value from it. So those are the two most common types of show notes, but there are show notes too that are just a good solid paragraph, and those are fine. It kind of just depends on your style and the topic of your show and your audience.
Okay, and I like that answer because I noticed in some of your work that's out there in the world, when you read it, it's not that I want to skip the podcast, but sometimes I'll just jump over in those notes. And certain platforms and different things, we'll get into that in just a minute. Those show notes are powerful. We always do a pre-call whenever we do these podcasts and stuff like that. So I told you about a podcast I liked. Even though I read the show notes, I didn't remember the actual the host's name. You found it, and you got it. So I can see where there's a type of importance there. Now, my thing is that there's so many platforms that you put show notes on, and I'm gonna throw a little twist in here. The one time I made really good show notes, I took them over to Tumblr, and I placed them on Tumblr because it's a blogging site. And somehow through the bots, real people started listening to my podcast because they were reading about it first. They had that summary and they were like, hey, he's got one decent show out of 90 because of those show notes. So that was one,
Yeah.
that's what kind of got me into it. And I was like, I need to grab Lisa before she gets way too famous or gets too busy, and get her out here to help me with that. So could you enlighten us on this? Aren't there like certain platforms that show notes enhance?
Well, so you can put your show notes kind of anywhere that you want. So, for example, maybe you have a WordPress website and you post your show notes on there with your with your episode linked, and it's just like every episode you put out, you go right to your website and you can read them, or you can copy and paste the show notes onto your Instagram post promoting that episode, or you can do that on Facebook or on Tumblr. So they're your show notes and you can copy and paste and put them wherever you want. But I would say the majority of my clients have a dedicated website for their podcast, and they put them on there in either the podcast section of their website, or they put them in a blog section and they use them as a blog.
Okay, and that's a good way of helping repurpose episodes, because you have this, not a transcript, but you have this, I call it a ledger basically, or you could almost turn this into maybe like a newsletter to a degree, right?
Yeah, you can. And that's another thing that I do is I write newsletters for podcasters, which is a whole other thing. But yeah, you can break up your show notes and put paragraphs here and there in a newsletter, or you can put them into like an Insta story or break them up into several posts. So you can do a lot with those show notes.
All right, so we can both agree that they're pretty much a valuable resource. Now, just in detail, because you are a professional at this, and I always love to have a professional one, because you like you're polished in this. One day you started, it always reminds me of like Murder She Wrote or whatever, you started on the typewriter at some point, then you got to a point where you had a computer and everything else. That's just fiction I'm throwing out there, guys, just to have a little humor. Yeah, just a little humor. So with the show notes, can you tell me what a great set of show notes should be like, in your opinion?
Yeah. Yes. So your show notes should sound like your podcast. They should be written in your voice. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to write them. If you're hiring somebody to do it for you, they need to be able to write in your voice so that it makes sense. You don't want people to listen to your podcast, go read your show notes, and they sound completely different or foreign. Like maybe your show notes use really big words or verbiage that you don't even say. So you want to make sure that do you know what I mean? Like
yes,
you want to make sure that the show notes are in your voice. You also want to always be sure to link your social media accounts and your website in your show notes. Always have a contact me section or a find me here section. And if you have a guest, you want to do the same for them, and always leave room for your sponsors too, if you have sponsors. So a good show note, it's written in your voice. It follows the conversation or follows the topic well. You have links to any resources or products you mentioned. There should be a whole section on the bottom for nothing but links to different things. Go here, go there, check this out. And I think it's good to just give your audience every resource that you can and to just offer this to them. It's not difficult to do. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it's a real value to your listeners.
And I can appreciate that. That's why I love having you on the show, because you're so informative. Now, everybody knows that you're the greatest virtual assistant. Now, if someone came to you, contacted you for service, if you have availability or whatever, and I throw it out there lightly like that, guys, because she's a very busy lady. She's a wife. She's out here in the world, and she's in one of the greatest states. A lot of people don't know this, but I started something new, and I don't know if you picked it up. I did an advertisement about this show before it even came into existence. I put West Virginia, Indiana reunite. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's actually out there.
I don't think I have.
Yeah, let me go back and look real quick. Sorry, guys. I know
I'll have to look it up.
Normally a little professional, but let me see what day it was. It was, God, it's been a while. Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry about that, guys, that I'm cutting into it. It was 4 days ago. Show notes, behind the scenes, coming soon. Indiana and West Virginia reunite.
Oh, okay. That's right. I'm in Indiana. It's the best state.
It has good quality.
Debatable.
Only thing I would take away from your state would be Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne could just go away.
Go kick rocks.
Yeah. But everywhere else is beautiful. Fort Wayne is and Gary. Oh Lord, Gary. But anyway, back to the what we're doing here. Someone contacts you for their services, and you discuss your rates with them. That's private business between you and your podcast affiliates and other things like that. So definitely, can you do a shameless plug real quick? Can you plug where they can find you real fast?
Sure. They can find me only on Instagram. That's the only place that I've ever really needed to be. And my handle is podcast VA Lisa Sheeley. That's where you can find me. That's the only place I am.
Okay, and you can also find her in a repurposed episode or a replay on my podcast, West Virginia and Commonplace, on all 17 streaming services, and on our new premium service for certain things. Anyway, shameless plug, we like to do this. So someone comes to you and they want you to, I've said this twice already, they want you to do show notes for their show. You set up your consultation. Now, when you do your consultation, to a degree, they kind of get a free listen off of you, correct? When starting this, because you have to contract what you're going to do, and then you have to listen.
Yeah, I do. And I mean, for my day job, I have a pretty long commute, so I have lots of time to listen to podcasts. I love to listen to podcasts, and this is very much a hobby for me. I really enjoy doing it. It's a creative outlet, and so I'm happy to listen to someone's podcast for the purpose of writing the show notes. But so yeah, I'll meet with them. We'll talk about what they need, and it just kind of rolls out from there.
And then you give them the different forms that they could do. And like you
Mhm.
said, you're so analytic that you already have genres already built into your Rolodex in your mind, or as I say, my
Mhm.
memories museum. So you know which way to go with it. And that's the expertise. And that's where I clap, because like you said something that was really crazy to me just a minute ago. You said that it's just a hobby, but I see it as an
Mhm.
actual job. Like you go into the podcast, you dissect it, and you figure out what's important in the podcast. Like that has to make you feel amazing, because you're the true advertisement wing in a podcast when you do the show notes.
Yeah, I guess I call it a hobby because um, I enjoy my day job so much that I would never quit doing that in exchange for doing this full time. But I also really enjoy being a podcast VA. So I just consider it a hobby because I like doing it. And I'm very conscious of people's budgets. I know podcasters, if they even have a budget, it's usually pretty tight. So I'm conscious of that. And I'm not necessarily doing this to, make a ton of money or anything. So I kind of base when I listen to them talk about what they need, I kind of get an idea in my head of, okay, what do I think would be the best fit for your podcast? And then we talk about what their budget is. And so I just try to work with everybody. It's not real serious. It's not like a real serious thing. I don't use contracts. We all just we just work together until it stops working. I'm very casual about it.
Yeah, working through a handshake, and that's one thing that's
Yes.
good. Now we're going to move on to some more deeper stuff, because you did have a topic that
Okay.
I'm having to bring you back for, because the thing that I'm trying to do with this behind the scenes is I want to be structured. Even if me and you do the next 6 shows, I want to
Mhm.
get people structured and centered, and realizing that there's more to podcasting than just making the podcast, having a good sound. It's more like
Mhm.
the newsletter. We won't talk about that right now, because that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
Um, the show notes, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, they're really engaging, like I said earlier, in like the blogging communities and stuff like that, but they're really engaging to certain older audiences, because not all the times, because some people may get to like a Tumblr or something like that, they may not get there, but some people may go to a streaming platform, for instance, like Google. And older
Mhm.
people, and I'll just say analytic people, because I will do this too if I'm listening to your podcast. I will go down through those show notes and I will click a link to see something. I probably won't buy anything, but if you have something that's really attractive and shiny, I might click another
Mhm.
time and buy it. So show notes to me, like they're really, at first I didn't understand them, not like
Mhm.
not comprehending them. I didn't understand their value.
Mhm.
And the more and more, you get into them, you find out that they're probably the best tool in marketing that you could have.
Yeah, I agree. And so at their core, show notes are nice because if you're listening to an episode and they mention something and you can't write it down because you're driving, you can go back later and read the show notes. That's the most obvious use of them. Or if you are hearing impaired but you're still interested in the topic, you can refer back to the show notes. So that is their most obvious value. But when it comes to things like selling products or promoting products, getting sponsorships, driving people to your website and your podcast, that's where their more business use comes in.
Right, and I truly agree with that, and I appreciate you for doing this for me, and the rest of the Legion and the other audiences that come along with this podcast, because
Mhm.
um, when I talk to other podcasters about this, and I'm giving away a little bit of the dirt, and I'm talking like 53%, because I started tallying, they care nothing about their show notes. But when they hear stories of people gaining listeners, it builds a level, in my famous phrases, it builds a level of intimacy that you're not going to get from the voice. Because some people can hear the voice, listen to that podcast, and then throw it away and then come back next week and listen. And it's just because they got they use an Android phone instead of an iPhone. So they can do that. But people with iPhones, I got to listen to something. I need to see more visual things. I want to scroll and look. I want to know more about you. Those notes build that intimacy, and they let you into someone's world to a degree, I believe. Maybe I'm putting a lot of emphasis on it, but it just changed me. And I wish, as a podcaster, when I first started, that I had invested in the show notes and done things different, because now with I'm not going to say a better quality of audience, but the more well-rounded listener that's doing more than just listening, that they want to be part of the experience. They want to see this and that. It brings a certain value that I'm not going to get from a service like TikTok. A longer attention span.
I think show notes, if you're really serious about being a podcaster and you want to make money off of your show and you want to get sponsors, I think having show notes is a good thing to offer your audience, but also kind of like the next obvious step in growing. And maybe a podcaster is unsure about show notes because they're not sure if they can write them themselves, but then maybe they also don't want to hire someone to do it because it can be hard to give up control of your baby, the podcast, and that's okay. But I do think it's something that you should seriously consider if you really want to go big with your podcast.
Okay. And I agree with that. And even though it's not a long topic to talk about, I want to thank you, Lisa, for coming on the podcast and doing this. And hopefully in the future, we can get you for some other topics, because one thing I do want to talk about, if we can.
1998, stamps.com has been an indispensable tool for nearly 1 million businesses. Stamps.com brings the service of the United States Postal Service and the UPS shipping right to your computer. Whether you're in an office sending invoices, a side hustle Etsy shop, or a full-blown warehouse shipping out orders, Stamps.com will make your life easier. All you need is a computer and a standard printer, supplies, or equipment. Within minutes, you're up and running, printing official postage for any letter, any package, anywhere you want to send. And you'll get exclusive discounts on postage and shipping from USPS and UPS. Once your mail is ready, just schedule a pickup or drop it off. No traffic, no lines. Cut the confusion out of shipping with Stamps.com's new rate advisory tool. You can compare shipping rates and timelines to easily find the best option. Save time and money with Stamps.com. There's no risk, and with my promo code POD, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in POD. That's Stamps.com, promo code POD. Stamps.com. Never go to the post office again.
Take 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes or a whole nother hour. Inside of being a virtual assistant, because we did that episode we did it like last year.
It was last year, yeah.
We did it like last year, and a lot has changed in the environment. There's subscription-based podcasting now that's heavier, and so many different things. How do you feel about the landscape of independent podcasting as it is now compared to last year?
I mean, I feel like anybody can start a podcast, and I feel like anybody is right now. It seems like every time I turn around, somebody that I personally know is starting a podcast or they're talking about it. And I think that's great. The more the merrier. And I mean, I've been listening to podcasts for years and years and years, and I love just being able to search for different topics that are of interest to me and finding a couple of shows to choose from. I do think that there has been more of a change, though, towards people wanting to make money off of their podcast as opposed to just doing it for fun. I've noticed more of like, how can I make money off of this? And that's okay too. I would say that's probably the biggest change I've noticed is clients wanting to make money instead of just doing it for fun or for a hobby.
Right. And I say that's one thing that hurts a business, and everybody knows me as the monetized man, but the thing is, like you said, it's a certain quality, and it used to be crazy. Like I would always tell someone, your catalog needs to at least be 10 episodes before you think about that. But people are putting out 4 episodes, or they're coming with 1,000 followers or 10,000 followers. And I no disrespect to anybody, but I know a lot of people are buying some listeners and stuff like that because likes, because I've noticed it's been a crazy few months, and some podcasts that have skyrocketed with their following. You see a lot of bots in their likes. I mean, you can buy them if you want them, but I'm not going to waste that kind of money to improve my podcast. I'll improve it the organic way. Hire someone like you that can help me in certain areas. And also, one thing I do want to throw in here, guys. Here's a story, and me and you haven't ever talked about this story, but I need to tell this right now.
Okay.
I had a show with Lark Galley, and I contacted your services to create a graphic for me. Your graphic did very well. I wasn't ever mad or upset with you. The show tanked at first, but because of your graphic that you did three of them for me, I believe. 3 graphics. Podcastagram Pat saw it and picked up my episode. And I don't know, we may have talked about this story. He picked up my episode, and that show went from being my worst show ever to it's in my top 5 episodes now because of the graphic you produced. So I always wanted to tell you a thank you from that, because even though I felt strong about it and I advertised it a certain way and the ads were looking good, he took your ad, threw an audiogram on it, which I may do one day, but it's not my style. Yeah. He threw an audiogram, and then he just put just 1 extra 10 on it. And that show skyrocketed. And for the longest time, it was my biggest episode until I did a Godzilla show or something. And I know we never talked about that, but I really want to thank you. And that's one thing I do want to tell everybody. I don't care who you are. Everybody can jump on Canva and do this and that, but you have to engage professionals. And I'm not talking about the Fiverr professionals. I'm talking about like you. You don't even know how I found you, right?
Nope. You just showed up one day in my DMs.
Right. Well, the story is that people who were talking about you then, it may have been on a minute scale then, but they brought your name up. And that's the greatest thing. That's the one thing that I say about professionals. Even though you said it's a hobby, you're a professional at what you do, because you can do all of it. You should have your own podcast called Lisa's Corner.
I don't know about that. But yeah, I mean, even though it's a hobby to me, I do take it very seriously, and I'm very professional in how I interact with my clients. I want the best for them. I want them to be happy with what I do. And if they're not happy, I'll do anything I can to fix it. So I guess when I say it's my hobby, I'm just trying to communicate how enjoyable it is for me. It's not just a job. It's what I do in my free time, essentially.
Yeah, and the thing is, I just wanted that story out there, because if it wasn't for you doing that the way you did, because I was doing Microsoft Paint. You seen my old ads. My ads looked rough. And then the smart thing is, and this is something that I'm telling people to do, and they need to continuously do. If someone gives you a trait and is willing to do that for you, pay for that work. Don't be sneaky and underhanded and, get the graphics and then run away with them. I mean, you're a nice business lady. You're not shrewd or anything like that. But from what you did, it set me up to learn more. And the thing is that from the quality that you did, I had to learn how to do background, foreground on certain things. And I got to a level that I can do an ad now just because I had to focus on that one thing instead of show notes. We'll have to work together on some show notes. I got an episode later we'll talk about.
Okay.
I got so polished with it that I can take anything, as long as they send it to me, I can make an ad in 2 minutes. And I carry 3 devices, and I'm glad to hear you're part of the family now too with the computer. And anyway, like just that little bit of knowledge that you passed in your work, you didn't tell me how to do it. You just made things so pristine and everything. Like people still talk about those pictures. I do repurposing for 2 years on my podcast episodes now. So people are
Mhm.
still grabbing at that stuff. So I definitely want people to come over to your Instagram page and to do business with you there. Now, on to my next question, and instead of all that ranting and raving and stuff about you. Don't want to get you too flustered. She kept a solid face the whole
It's
time.
okay.
She didn't get red or anything. She's like, yeah, I do this, man. Um, so what is something that you see in the next few months that's going to be changing in the podcast business? I'm going to give you a little filler and then you can go from here. I'll tell you this. This is one thing that I noticed that's changed. Um, Spotify got out here and started buying every little thing up. All small,
Mhm.
like a lot of small entities. They got deals with WordPress now. A year ago, they didn't have a deal with WordPress. You had to pay somebody to work that WordPress. You still have to pay somebody to do it because you can start it, but you can't maintain it, which you're proficient in a lot of areas. What do you see that will be different later? The thing that I see that's going to be different, and so that you'll have your thoughts together on this one. I see more video podcasting taking over because I watch 2 podcasts on Twitch because I can put them in a little bubble and I can keep playing Pokemon Go and still listen. So Twitch to me, even though it's got its own streaming force and some people do podcasts over there, but the way that some of these guys are doing it and all that, I see that video podcast, not YouTube, because YouTube's a repurposed site to me. It's like about like the videos that we shoot. I should throw them all up on there, but I don't have explicit consent from anybody that has done a show with me to put it on YouTube. So if anybody ever does want that, please head over to westvirginiacommonplace.com and we'll get a waiver signed and I'll put it on YouTube. But anyway, what do you think is going to be the next big thing or the difference or something new in podcasting?
Well, I guess I I thought that TikTok was going to be the next big thing for podcasters. There are for sure podcasters on TikTok. I don't know how much value it has been to them. I haven't found a lot of information about it so far. And I know that you are on TikTok, so maybe you can speak to that. But I was hoping and expecting that TikTok would be the next big platform for podcasters. I know I know a lot of podcasters who have moved to YouTube. It is just an additional way of driving traffic to their website and just having a different way to deliver content to their audience. Patreon continues to be
Yes.
popular with podcasters, and I think it's a good idea. And why not? And then kind of circling back to newsletters, putting out a newsletter every week or every month or quarterly using maybe a platform like MailChimp. I think newsletters are a really good thing to offer your audience, and it helps them keep connected to you in between seasons, and it's easy way to repurpose your content. So I'm not really sure that, to me, it's hard to predict what the trends are going to be, and each podcaster is different and one platform may not work for them or one trend may not work. I think just maybe either try everything or stick to what works, just kind of figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I like that too because I'll be 100% honest with you. Like TikTok, I tried to like. I'm a talk show host. I am nothing more. I'm not even a podcaster. I'm an entertainer. If you listen to my delivery, but I'm very serious. Like I have a serious structure to my life. Even when I sleep, I'm serious in my sleep. So I try to come off as a comedian, and like that delivery got a little bit of laugh out of you, but it was really serious for me. It was heartfelt. It came out of my memories museum from the bottom of the foundry in my heart to be serious. And
Mm-hmm.
I found that it's just like I can't shuck and jive and do all these extra dances and all this other stuff to get listeners. But then I see certain podcasts that can, like what we're doing right now, they have the extra camera, which I always have these all kinds of cameras. I should do it one day. They do a panoramic, or they got the camera like here dangling down and the iPad over here or whatever you're using. And I can't do all that. I'm not about that life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important that you know yourself, because if you're doing something that's not you, that's going to come through. Like, just be yourself, and just know that your people will find you, your audience will find you, and they listen to your show because they like your content and they like you as a person. You don't need to pretend and try things that don't feel natural, but at the same time be open, to maybe trying different platforms just to see if it works.
Okay. Now, Lisa, I apologize about this, but there comes a part in this
Mm.
show, and we didn't do this because I didn't have this call yet, but we have to pay homage to 2020. John Stossel was a comedian of the show. He had that little whatever. Nobody paid attention to that. Diane Sawyer came on about, I don't know, 10:20ish to like 10:40. She asked some hard-hitting questions, but at 10:40, 10:41, 10:42, Barbara Walters came on there. And Barbara Walters either sent you to bed early or she let you stay up to 11:06 or something. And you either had something thought-provoking or something that just put you to sleep. You didn't care. Well, you're on the hot seat now. Okay. These are questions that I don't prepare people for. You are a virtual assistant, so there's so many aspects to the business. And me and you see each other visually right now. I want to pull something up.
Mhm.
This is a QR code. Okay.
Okay.
So I need to ask you a question about QR codes because I don't know that much about them. I've been going around grassrooting, right? And I've been
Mhm.
taking QR codes and slapping them up everywhere. When I go to a mall and I see a pole, slap it up there. What, because you're like with a virtual assistant, you work in every form of with the graphics and everything, so you have a marketing mind. What would be a way for a fledgling podcaster to market their show through a virtual assistant?
Well, you can hire a virtual assistant to only market your show. So you can say, I want to grow my podcast. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. I want you to create graphics and post to these platforms so many times a day or so many times a week. You can hire somebody to just do all of that for you. And I do recommend using those platforms and doing that exact thing, but you have to be consistent. And I myself am not as consistent as I should be. So I need to take my own advice. But if you want to grow your podcast and you're going to use social media to do it, you have to be consistent because you're up against so many other podcasters and people's memories are short. You want to stay in their face, on their feed all the time, and be consistent, not only in how often you post, but what you post. Like every week you post your episode that's coming up. You do your little audiogram or your graphic or promote your guest. And you just need to commit to it. It's okay to fall off here and there, but you'll notice when you do. You'll notice when you fall off.
Okay. And listen, once again, I can appreciate that because that's a hard hitting question. Now, that was just your Diane Sawyer question.
Okay.
All
Thanks,
right.
Diane.
Now we're going to get to the nitty gritty with Barbara Walters, and I love doing this with people because this is my favorite thing. Because I got questions that I make them into multi chapters. So
Okay.
you are hired to take over my podcast. Not take over. That's the wrong way to say it, but I'll say it anyway. I hire you to assume the marketing, full control over the podcast beyond what I produce. You hear an episode, and it's not great, and it's not great. How do you feel about like you're using your integrity, like in telling someone that it's not that great?
How do I tell you something's not that great?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would never use those words. That's just not who I am. What I would do is I would first tell you what is really good. Pick out what is really good. There's always going to be something good. Maybe it's the topic or the guest, or maybe it's the way that the verbiage you used or the order that you spoke about things. So I would pick out everything that's good and then say, hey, I noticed there was this thing. Let's see if we can change it or maybe work to improve it. But I would never just come and say, your episode was no good. I can't do anything with this. Like I think being a podcaster is a learning process, just like being a VA is. And I just don't have it in me to be so aggressive. I would be more, like creative, like constructive criticism and encourage. I want to encourage you, I don't want to discourage you.
Right,
I
right,
tend
right.
to work with a lot of new podcasters. I do have some clients that have been around for years and years, 6, 7 years of podcasting, but
Ooh,
I tend to work with newer podcasters, and I want to encourage them and help them grow. So that's the approach that I usually take.
okay. Now, there's another part to this question. So you decided that you're going to take the high road with the other question I asked you, which I appreciate that. And you're a genuine person, and that's who you are. So that's fine. Has there been a situation, and we anonymize things so that we don't speak about people. Has there ever been a situation in being a virtual assistant that you had to just step back from for a day or two, like just a crazy demand or something, or just something that was out of context for you at that moment? Has it ever happened to you thus far?
No, I've been really fortunate in that everybody that I've worked with, they're just good people. I I have interviewed with potential clients who I felt would not be a good fit. And so in that way, I probably dodged a bullet. But for the folks that I have literally worked with who have been my clients, they've all been really great people. Never any concerns from my side. Hopefully they don't have any concerns from theirs. But I feel like everybody that I've worked with has just been a really genuine, good person and is just out there doing their best to bring content to their listeners. And I'm happy to go along with them on the ride.
Okay. Now, you work with someone that we're friends, and we have a mutual
Mhm.
friend between us, uh,
We do.
Stephanie. And
Yes.
Stephanie has an amazing podcast, and she says that I pronounce it wrong. I say Step Up Podcast, and she says it's Step Up Podcast. And if I put that
Yes.
extra sound in there, I said it won't sound country anymore. So I'm going to say it the way I say it.
Okay.
Yeah. So now I have a story with her. We interviewed the same guest one time. It was a lady, I don't remember her name, Jolie Glenn or something like that. Well, yeah, that was her name exactly. So she did this episode, and you've been involved with her quite a bit. Um, and this is just a preference, but I'd like to get an answer out of you. I might not get one because this might be really a tough question. I listened to her episode and my episode, right? And I listened to the
Mhm.
sound quality, and I listened to the questions. I took my coffee and filled it up twice and listened to hers. I listened to mine. I kind of put it to the side. Um, in listening to her, and this is not big in her, making her bigger or say anything to hype her up. When I listened to her show, the difference that I seen was I asked good questions. I got a different banner. I've got a formula. It's a format. But when I listened to her interview, it was the way that she said things. She like draw these things out of Julie that I couldn't get. Julie was kind of prudent with me, and I was like, you know. So, and I just, you don't force interviews, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but I kind of had to take the training wheels and show her how to use the training wheels. But Stephanie like gripped it real quick and just, flowed with it. How do you? Because you hear different episodes and you hear people's episodes with different guests. When you have someone working for you, how do you like put the brakes on, not telling them that they did a better interview than someone else or that they didn't do a better interview than someone else? That's a hard question.
Well, I haven't had that happen, but if I were in that situation, if one person was able to relate to the guest in a different way than the other person, I think there's value in both of those, because you can have one guest interviewed by two different people, and those two different people bring out value in a different way. So unless the episode itself was just really bad, I don't think that there's anything wrong with having two different interview styles for one guest. I think there's value in both styles, and that guest is going to relate to someone else in a different way. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's just who the podcast host is and just who the guest is. So I think there's value in the way that you do your episodes and the way that Stephanie does hers. You both have great episodes. You both do a great job with your guests. And yeah, that I think there's value in both.
Well, I'm gonna say from my side, once I listened to hers, I started taking some P's and Q's from her, and obviously the new microphone and not those $5 microphones from the bargain bin, but yeah, I can go with that. But I'll say this, like sometimes I get wrapped up in other podcasters because I'll hear them and I'm like, man, I need that sound, but I can't afford that sound. Not with a microphone, just how they are, and I get a little tired.
Yes, sir. Bet the house. We are the most happiness podcast, the most grindingest podcast, the most hardworkingest podcast. Come tap in with us every Friday, brand new episodes on all platforms. So if you want that real, you want that funny, you want that authentic, this is the place to get it. We lit, we have fun, we party, but we always keep it real. We always keep it up, we always never let you down. Tap into us, Bet the House, always betthehouse.com. Let's go.
Unapologetic and we stand on that. We make you think, we make you laugh out loud. The realest place on the internet, hands down. We give it to you straight, nothing here is watered down. The best show in town, and you can bet the house. Yes, you can bet the house. Yes, you can bet the house. We give it to you straight, nothing here is watered down. The best show in town, and you can bet the house.
Out there. So now, Lisa, this is the last thing.
Mhm.
And once again, I want to thank you for coming on West Virginia Uncommonplace because we love having you. Might have to start a
Thank you.
series with you, somehow.
Okay.
I'll have Lisa's Corner. Because one good thing about me is I can always convey an idea and eventually wrap people up in it and they'll go along with it. So maybe we'll get some free time out of you, but you're a very, very busy lady. And I thank you for your time once again.
You're welcome.
What's in the future for you? And the reason I always ask this to people, and I want to know this, is because, you're out here, you have a fledgling business, you handle clients, you have other clients with your other job, and then you have other clients with your other job.
Mm-hmm.
So what is next for you?
Well, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing. I only work with so many clients at a time because I can only manage so many at a time. And I'm always honest with when people come to me, and they want to know if we can work together. If I don't feel like I can take them on as a client and produce quality work for them, then I'll be honest about that. I'm not going to try to, cram your podcast in to my week. So at this point, I just consider, each person that comes to me, I just consider their podcast and what I can do for them. But I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing. I'm good at a very particular set of things, and that's what I'll continue to offer my clients. And I really enjoy it.
And future clients also.
Yes, and future clients. Yes.
Right. Okay. And I like that. Now, with that being said, one thing that I'd like to address to you, and this is something that just happened this week. I am doing a top 400 independent podcast list.
Mm-hmm.
On this list, I made one concession. There cannot be a number 400 or a number 1. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think I understand the question. Like, what do you mean exactly?
What I'm asking you is, like, I decided that I'm going to do a top 400 podcast list. I'm going to get all kinds of people. I'll find a way to get you involved because you listen to a lot of independent podcasts and different things too. But I'm not going to have a number 1 or a number 400 because I feel like those two numbers don't represent anything. If you get close to the top, or if you get somewhere in the middle, or you get even 399, you have a great podcast that's being acknowledged.
Okay.
Do you think there's something wrong with my formula of not having a number 1 or 400?
No, it sounds to me like you're saying you're not going to have anyone that's the best, and you're not going to have anyone that's the worst. Everybody is just in it together, and they're on the list because you enjoy them.
Yes.
So you're ranking them in a way, but you're not putting anybody at the very top and no one is at the very bottom.
Right.
That's good.
And that's my next venture. And because I want to take a little time away from podcasting, because everybody knows that I've got so many episodes in the background. Something real interesting this Saturday, if anybody gets a chance, because I will be putting this out really soon. I mean, you'll have to talk about a time that works for you. But I repurposed an episode, like not like doing a ad and bringing it back or something like that. No, I actually had an episode that was in my archives. It was a great episode. It has this guy named Todd Sullivan, right? He does Korean horror books.
Oh.
Yeah, see, you did the O right there. It's like it's got a wow factor, but it just with everything I do, and it became more business. I had to put it on the shelf because I didn't have any way to bring it out. Well, I'm sitting back and I'm in my recliner, and something crazy happened. I took an ad of you. I went back because I had listen soon. I took the listen soon off, and I published it. I was like, Lisa's episode, some people are going to listen to again, and I put it out, and people listened to it. And I was like, you know what? I've got shows on the shelf. Why not have a series where you actually repurpose the episode, put a beginning and the disclaimer of why it didn't come out, not in a rude way to make an enemy of the guest that you didn't put the show out for, because sometimes I lose contact with people, and some people fizzle out in their ventures. Like I've had at least 20 episodes I've thrown away for the simple fact that people are writing a book and they quit. I say to authors, please have your book finished before you come, or your manuscript, something.
Yeah.
But I had 20 episodes altogether, people that had good ideas. They were in the middle of their book, and I never heard from them again. So that's the next thing I'm doing. So lastly, and this will be the final thing, what is your advice to a fledgling podcaster right now? You said a word, consistency. And people go with consistency so much when I ask them this, but they never explain the consistency that they're talking about. And you've explained it this episode about the social media, about basically if they hire you, their consistency will be fine because you can take care of it for them. So go ahead.
I would say just maintain consistency with your interest in what you're doing. You sometimes podcasters, they start out really gung-ho, they're super excited, they have topics lined up for maybe their first 5 or 6 episodes, and then they start to fizzle out, and maybe that's because it's more work than they thought, or maybe they're feeling some imposter syndrome and they're thinking, oh, nobody's listening to this, I only had like 10 downloads, or they lose interest in their topic. But any of those scenarios will come through to your listener in your podcast. So if you really aren't feeling it on a particular week, don't record that episode, because it'll come through that you're not really interested. So I think if you're going to start a podcast, put a lot of thought into it. Think about how committed you are to doing it, what your purpose is behind it, what you want, your goals, and just be yourself and let things unfold organically as they will. Take your show seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously.
And I thank you. Now, once again, our shameless plug, Lisa, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram, podcast VA Lisa Sheeley, or you can find me on your Instagram page or on your podcast.
I thank you very much. And once again, this is West Virginia Commonplace and Lisa Sheeley Productions signing off.
Bye.